music review, and it's Overnite Sensation by Frank Zappa, released in 1973. For those of you familiar with Zappa, you'll be well aware that he was a workaholic, and he wanted to document everything that he was involved in musically. He's got a library full of concerts that were recorded, and sadly, of course, we lost him in the 90s, but his music still stands head and shoulders above many of his contemporaries. This album is regarded by many as the first conventional rock album by Zappa, although normal is a bit subjective in the Zappa world. And it was also joined together with the other album that he released in 1973, Apostrophe, and they made a show on the Classic Albums collection, and I had a quick look at that again, and if you're interested, you can get a copy of it on YouTube, but it's in 5 sections. So you need to download all 5 and then you can join it together. It's got Spanish subtitles, but it's in good condition, and you will get a sort of review of the album, a look at his career. There's an interview, there's some snippets of interviews with Frank, but the Classic Album program was made at the beginning of the millennium, long after Frank had passed on. But there are interviews with Ruth Underwood, who was involved in both albums, as was George Duke, the keyboard and synth man. And we also get contributions from members of his family, including Dweezil Zappa, who continued on tour with his father's material, and he's an excellent guitar player in his own right, and he also goes into the studio and gives us a sort of insight as to the engineering aspects of the production of this album, which is extremely eye-provoking. Certainly I enjoyed it. And we also get some contributions from one of his biggest fans, the actor Billy Bob Thornton, and so we better get back to the album, I suppose. I could talk about Zappa for hours, but I'm sure you don't want me to do that. Let's get back to the album then. So this album, as I say, is much more easy on the listener. Some of Frank's earlier works, to say the least, was quite avant-garde and also very much dominated by humour and the lyrics, although and the music was pretty complicated. This continues with this album. There's still a lot of amusing stuff around in the lyrics, but I would suggest that the actual music is easier to like on first listens, but I've got to say, you must give it repeated listens, because you will hear a lot more on subsequent listens. This is an album that deserves to be played regularly. So to track 1 then, Camarillo Brillo. What the hell's he talking about? Well, it's one of Zappa's extraordinary characters, and the music, well, the horns are really laid way back, and they mix beautifully with the delicate guitar licks, and Frank's vocal narrative. He generally preferred a sort of narrative with regard to the vocals. He basically felt that it told the story in an easier way. It's a little bit like a vaudeville for theatrical play, slapstick circus act almost, and it's about, the lyrics are about a woman with peculiar idiosyncratic habits who becomes an amorous adventure for Frank. I noticed that some of the guitar work, the licks were very similar to those developed later on by Mark Knopfler in Dire Straits. This crazy lyric at the end, is that a real poncho, a Mexican poncho? And then there's a breezy piano outro. It's a great starter. Track 2 is called I'm the Slime, and it starts with a manic guitar thrash before a catchy rhythm with horns and strange vibes to boot. The marimba's in there, which is Ruth Underwood's instrument, and it's heard throughout. Then Frank's sleazy narrative serenades your ears. You're invited to visualize a character from your TV life that you despise, all very much encouraging you to join in. It's very much a critique of how TV manipulates your psyche. And it's all very tongue-in-cheek. There's an hilarious chorus which is 50s style, and then there's some incredible wah-wah guitar from Frank that's truly mesmerizing. Reminded me of the hot instrumental album of a few years previous, Hot Rats, particularly the work on Willie the Pimp. Then it fades out. It's a terrific 3.5 minutes of music. To track 3 then, Dirty Love. This is a personal favourite of mine. The lyrics tell that story of a sleazy desire for wicked lust, with a tinge of pornography included. The instrumental bits behind this take is simply 5-star, with another terrific guitar solo. Zappa's guitar is impressive throughout this album. And then there's these odd references to a poodle in the narrative, which invites you to speculate, but don't mention that's oral sex, will you? It's a terrific track. Then to track 4, 50-50. I'm not quite sure what the lyrics are about here. I think it's basically what happens in a man's or young boy's mind when he's working out the odds about getting laid. It's a very fast and very speedy rhythm that skips, and there's some frantic vocals at the beginning, which is almost wailing. The keyboards are fast and the horns are back in the mix, but very much part of the arrangements, those orchestral majors. And then the bass and the frenetic organ mixed mesmerizingly before being joined by Frank's lead, which blitzes you into heaven. It's again very Hot Rats inspired, I think, and there's a cracking violin solo in there as well. And then that screeching siren-like second guitar dubbed in, I guess, that just quickens the pace a few notches. This is a terrific piece of music and definitely the pick of the high-quality bunch. It then returns to that middle of the road, that mad human voice at its outro. And some nice horn orchestral arrangements see us out. It really takes your breath away. So that's track 4. Side 2 now, track 1, Zomby Woof. There's a horn intro with some skewy style keyboards. It's a bit of a gothic horror parody which accompanies a really complex jazz structured rhythm for the modern jazz connoisseur. It's pretty weird, and the guitar wailing and the crazy vocals to boot. Odd horn and guitar outro. It's got a bridge to a more sophisticated guitarism, and there's no doubt in the complexity of the arrangement. There's definitely a quiet taste, and this track is notable for having the Ikettes, and Tina Turner singing. And in fact, they turn up on 4 tracks on this album, got paid basically a very low rate of pay, and apparently the album was produced in Ike Turner's studio, but he wasn't that impressed with the results, particularly those tracks that involved his wife and his singers. That's worth noting. You can just about hear Tina on this, and the lead vocal is sung by Ricky Langelotti. It's very snarling like, and certainly notable for its vocals. Up next is Dinah Moe Hum. What a catchy, dirty piece of work this is, and became a very popular number on the live set. It tells a tale of sex as a ménage à trois, two girls and a man, of course. The story's witty, a little gross, but Frank loves this sort of material. It's about, it may be about buying sex, but we're not quite sure about that. The music is pretty basic. It's a platform for the tale telling, and not a lot happening, but you can create your own sexual fantasy when you listen to Frank's narrative. It's a bit too long as well, I guess, but nevertheless, if you like to fantasize about your women, possibly oral sex, and imagine the Ikettes with Tina Turner singing the harmonies, well, I'm sure you'll love it. Okay, next track up is the last track of the album. Not too many tracks on this album, just 7 in all. It's Montana, and it's more stories about moving to the state, the acid state. We hear about dental floss, wax and other dental pursuits. Not quite sure what that's all about. Anybody's guess, but it's rescued by some nice guitar from Frank, opening his shoulders. And again, I like the female cartoonish vocals, backing vocals from Tina and the girls. And there's some good work by Ruth Underwood on vibraphone, of course, and marimba. Of course, her husband is also on this album. I'm going to buy you a horse, Frank's nod to the cowboy experience. What the hell is my lonely dental floss? And then there's this rip-roaring chorus, yippee-yi-yi-tire, or something, yippee-yi-yi-tire. I can't sing it, but it goes on for a fair bit. And it's a very catchy piece of work, quite complex in places. So what do we have then? We've got 35 minutes of fantastic music here. Is an acquired taste. It's an educational lesson for rock enthusiasts. I love it, but many will probably hate it, overindulgent. But Zappa tends to polarize, or did tend to polarize his audience. The artwork is worth a mention. Dave McMacken with a Salvador Dali type feel, very surreal, with a two-headed man, Zappa, of course, sitting on a waterbed on a holiday in a Holiday Inn hotel, surrounded by TV, and we see Zappa with slime oozing out of his mouth, and lots of depictions of possibly sexual acts. So there we have it. In conclusion, some tremendous orchestration and visceral guitar, honky in places, razor sharp as well. Some avant-garde sci-fi sounds added in to the mix. It's very progressive, and Zappa, well, if you like his music, you will certainly love this. I did note from the classic albums a point that was made by Ruth Underwood, that Zappa wrote the music on music sheets for every instrument and provided that for the musicians. A lot of this was quite complex, but what a true genius. So that's Overnite Sensation by Frank Zappa, released in 1973, and I will be doing a review of Apostrophe soon.